always so hard to find the screen that you want to share. Okay. Good. Can you guys see it? Okay, cool. Yeah, so hey guys, my name is Aditi, and I'm really excited to share a little bit more about my journey today. I prepared a little presentation for you guys just to go over some of the challenges that I faced, what I learned, and just some tips that I have for all of you. So if there's anything that I didn't cover, or if there's anything you're more curious about, feel free to just put it in the chat and be happy to answer. So I thought I would start by just giving you guys a little overview of my personal journey into UX. As you can see, all of this happened in the last year, so it really goes to show how much life can change in a year. So last summer, I was actually working as an architect, and that's what I did my undergrad in. And I just wasn't feeling very fulfilled with the profession. I just wasn't excited to go into work every day. And I don't know, I craved something different, something a little more interdisciplinary. And that's when I discovered UX. And I thought it was this really cool major and what I felt like I should have been doing all along. So that's when I started thinking about transitioning, and I decided to start the HCID program here at IU. So I joined last summer, and in a couple months, I ended up getting a UX design intern position at LinkedIn, which is really exciting. So I just want to share some of the steps that got me there and what I've learned along the way. Yeah, so like I said, a lot can happen in a year if you really work hard and you work smart. Um, it was not an easy journey by any means. I was super overwhelmed when I first started the program because I didn't have any experience. And I didn't really know if like this was the right decision. Like I didn't want to find out later that this wasn't something that I wanted to do because that happened with architecture. And I remember my first day of the program, our seniors were like, okay, you need to have your portfolio ready in a month. You need to start applying in November. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't have any experience. How am I supposed to get a portfolio up? I don't have any projects. So it was a very stressful time for me and very just overwhelming. So if you don't have any experience, if you're just getting started, these are some tips that I think worked out for me, and I would highly recommend that you think about these. So firstly, I would recommend just start looking for UX opportunities around IU. I think this is just the easiest way to gain exposure and learn UX in practice. You're just not going to learn like how UX works in practice in classes. You'll more learn like the conceptual or ideal side of things. Um, if you can't get an opportunity in UX, I would say do your own personal projects. This is just a great way to show passion, and it's a great way to like get involved in that UX process while doing something you're really passionate about and you find really interesting. And then finally, just start reaching out to people. You would be surprised at how receptive people are and how willing they are to help, especially people who are more junior, because everyone's gone through this stage. Like they all remember how sucky it was to begin and how hard it was. So just reach out to people and like ask them questions about their own journey. Moving on to applications. So, it goes without being said, you need a portfolio. I'm not going to talk too much about portfolios because there's so many great articles on Medium and so many great resources to help you build a great portfolio. But I do want to kind of touch on the two hot topics about applications. So the first one is cover letters. I get so many questions about cover letters, like whether you need one, whether people actually read it. And I would say it is more important for smaller companies. I feel like smaller companies, they just get less applicants, so they are more likely to read your cover letter. But from my experience and what I've heard from recruiters at larger companies, they aren't as important just because they get thousands of applications. So they just really don't have the time to like look through every single cover letter. With that being said, I wouldn't say like don't do one. If you have the time, go for it. It's never going to hurt your application. But if you are pressed for time, I'd say you can afford to skip it for the larger companies. And then moving on to referrals, I cannot stress like how important a referral is. I think there's like a LinkedIn statistic that says 9 out of 10 people who get the job come in with a referral, which just shows like how essential that is. Um, it's just how it is. Like, at bigger companies, they get thousands of applications and they cannot physically go through every single application. So they just are just going to go through the ones that come through with referrals. And if they find their candidate there, it's just, they might not get to your application. That's not to say that you can't get it without a referral. It just makes it a lot easier. So that was sort of like general information. I do want to touch on like my specific journey. It was a really long and tough year. So I applied to over 100 companies. I'm pretty sure this number of rejections is lower than it was. It probably was like 70 or 80. At one point, I remember I was getting about like 5 rejections a day. It was a really, really tough time. But eventually things started getting a little bit better and I started getting more interviews. Um, I I got some of these interviews after I got the offer with LinkedIn. So I'd say I actually only interviewed around 4 places. And out of those 4 interviews, I managed to convert 3 of them. So it got better toward the end, but it definitely was not easy to start with. Um, so like I said, like my rejection rate was pretty bad. I I knew something might not be right. I mean, I knew I didn't have experience, but I didn't think I was that bad to not get a single interview. And so I just want to talk about how I handled some of that rejection. First thing is don't let it get to you because like rejection is part of the experience. Everybody will get rejected, even people with more experience. Like, for example, I have LinkedIn on my resume right now, but I just got rejected the other day. So you just have to accept that it's going to happen, but it really is how you bounce back from it that will define how successful you are. Um, if you are getting rejected a lot, I really recommend that you start reaching out to people and asking for feedback. Just reach out and be like, hey, I've been getting rejected. I would really love your advice and would love some feedback on my work. It could be your portfolio, it could be your resume. But I would really say, please do not be transactional about this. Like, don't just message them and be like, hey, can you give me feedback? Because they get so many of these messages. So you really have to be, friendly and genuine and warm and make them feel like they want to help you and want to reply to you. Um, I got some pretty harsh feedback. It was really hard to hear. Some of them said that I should just like get rid of a project. I should start a whole new project. Um, so it was tough to hear, but you just sort of have to take it and act on it. Um, I had so much feedback that I decided to just take a break from applying and iterate on my portfolio. So I spent around 3 weeks just iterating on my portfolio and putting that feedback back into it. I gave myself a really strict time limit. So this happened around December, where like it was Christmas time, so people weren't really looking at applications anyway. So I told myself, all right, you have to like beginning of January to work on your portfolio and start applying again. And then come January, I did, and that's when I started getting more of those interviews. Um, and so, like I said, I actually was able to convert most of my interviews. So here's just what I think worked for me and some tips for successful interviews. It's really important that you make a presentation of your portfolio. So you shouldn't just present from your portfolio website itself. You should make like an actual slide deck because that's just going to help you so much with storytelling and really focusing on what points you want to focus on. Really know your project inside and out because that's going to be the bulk of the questions. They're going to ask you to defend why you made the decision that you did. And then just be conversational. I know that's easier said than done, but in retrospect, I feel like the most successful interviews I've had are when it felt like it wasn't an interview, when it felt like, I was just talking to them, like trying to get to know them and they were trying to get to know me. Because at the end of the day, like that's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone they can work with. Like they know you don't have experience. And then finally, to end with, I want to talk about my internship. This was such an incredible experience. I learned so much over the past summer, more than I learned in my entire year. So my team was the first line workers team. This is a team that you probably haven't heard of. You probably don't know much of. So my team designs for frontline and hourly workers, so people who work as like customer service people, like waitresses, sales, cashiers, construction workers. They don't really have college degrees and they typically earn lower wages. And so when you think of LinkedIn, you don't really think of those people because you think of people who have college degrees, you think of people who are professionals, and that's like part of the problem. So this group doesn't feel like they belong on LinkedIn. They don't feel like they can find work on LinkedIn. And my team really tries to change that and make their experience a little bit better. Um, and so my main project was to design a growth feature to scale the number of people who fill up this form on the right. That was literally my prompt. Like I had a little more detail, but it was as ambiguous as that. Um, and it was up to me to decide like how I wanted to approach this project, like what I had to do every week, um, what I was going to present every week. Like it was all up to me. So you're really just thrown into this experience and you're expected to work as if you were like a normal employee. And then finally, what I learned, I think my biggest takeaway from this experience was just a deeper appreciation for hourly workers. They really have such different pain points to people like us. And it was so fulfilling to know that what I was designing was making a difference in their life and actually like helping them find work and increase their quality of life. So that was probably like the biggest thing that I was most proud of. But I definitely learned how to lead meetings better. Leading meetings is hard enough, but I think making it like leading cross-functional meetings are harder. Firstly, with leading meetings, you have to like develop your agenda and then you have to be able to stick to it. So if people go off topic, you have to learn how to bring them back to that, to your like agenda, which is really intimidating. And especially with cross-functional meetings, these are people that are more senior to me. They're people who work in like sections that I'm not as familiar with. So it's super intimidating to be like, okay, like I need this information from marketing, I need this information from product, but it's so necessary because that's going to determine like how successful your project is. Um, and then finally, I learned how to convey complex ideas. So as you can see, my project was really vague and really large. And so I had to learn how to convey different ideas in different meetings. So I had to learn how to like break it down into digestible parts, but also change what I was saying depending on my audience. So some people I talked to every week and some people had never heard of this project before. So learning how to like know what I should present was really important. All right, cool. I know that was a lot of info. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you, Aditi, for the insights. I definitely learned a lot about the application and the interview process. And I love how there's so much creativity and flexibility involved in your job, and definitely made me want to become an UX designer even more now. Next up, we have Paco, who, like we said, was an UX quality engineer intern at ServiceNow. So take it away, Paco.
Hey everyone, let me share my screen. And thanks Aditi for that. That was awesome. It's like awesome advice, and I definitely like related to some of your experiences as well in terms of applying. Um, but yeah, today I'm gonna talk about kind of my internship experience at ServiceNow, how I got there, and kind of like my journey, tips and tricks, stuff like that. So a little bit about me. I am a senior right now. So my majors are marketing and informatics. So I'm doing a major in both Kelly and in Luddy School, which is awesome. I have a part-time job as a UX engineer at IU. Currently, I'm working on the new, I'm designing for the new IU mobile app that is available on the App Store. So you should go download that. In my free time, I like to listen to music, like I said. I like taking pictures. I like skateboarding around Bloomington, and I love traveling as well. So, just as a background of how I got started in UX, in high school, I've always known that I like to design, but I did mostly like graphic design, branding, those kind of things. And I didn't really hear of like UX design. I've only, even if I've done like screen mockups, those are like UI stuff. And I wanted to do graphic design major, but I told my dad, and he said no. He said graphic designers don't make any money, which I don't think is true. Um, but because of that, I decided to go into marketing as a major, and thinking that I could do like a lot of design. And I found out that IU has an informatics major, and I love it. This is like kind of what I wanted to do because I like tech, I like design and stuff like that. So I joined that. And I also designed the IU mobile app when I was a freshman as like a side project because I saw like the old IU app wasn't too great. So I designed it, and then I talked with my current boss right now. I told him about the idea, I showed him what I've built, and he loved it. And so I joined IU's UX office, and that's when I started to kind of understand what UX is about. I love how I'm able to like design and make stuff that kind of helps people use their products better. So that's kind of like my journey, and I kind of realized that I want to do UX in the long term and want to get a career out of that. So I started looking in internships, and this summer was my first internship experience ever because last summer I was taking summer classes. And so, like at DD, I didn't really have like a lot of like work experience, and I applied to a lot of things. Um, I started applying in July, and I kind of kept an internship log for like my applications, my referrals, and where I got interviews from, and stuff like that. I applied to over 40 roles, um, and I actually got an interview with ServiceNow through the career fair at IU, and I got three interviews as well. And like Aditi said, referrals is super important, and I got those because of referrals. I'll kind of talk about that later on as well, I guess. But yeah, if you're looking for an internship, I highly recommend creating an Excel sheet, a Google sheet, or something like that. I use Notion here to kind of like list out all of the companies, all of the names that you're applying to, their job type, if you're into different types of internships, and kind of like how far you are to kind of like see at the end like what worked well and what didn't. So ServiceNow, I know like quality engineer sounds like very foreign to me. It did to me, to you guys. It did to me as well. So quality engineer, let me introduce that. It's basically, it's a little bit more technical than just like a regular design job, but it's not as technical as a software engineer. So I don't write as much code, but I do a lot of testing of the products that ServiceNow builds. But I also write some automated tests to make sure that those work as well. Um, and when I was interviewing, I was actually talking with my hiring manager, and I told him that I really liked um, UX and front end design. And so I actually got placed in a very front end role at ServiceNow. And I got to work with a lot of web components and kind of work along about the design as well. Talk about that in a bit. So about the application process at ServiceNow, if you're interested. Um, I first met my recruiter at the career fair. He was super nice, and we talked for a little bit, and it was really fascinating to me how quick he looked at my resume and understood what I wanted to do. Um, if you don't know, like recruiters only look at resumes for a very short period of time, so when you're creating resumes, make sure that it's readable. And back then, because everything was in person, I had a next day interview. It was a lot of conceptual and technical questions about that, and I kind of wanted to talk about how to stand out in an interview as well. Like Aditi, I actually printed out a few design work that I had. So I have my portfolio, but I took some of the best work from that and then printed out as a document to show my hiring manager back then. And he was very impressed. I walked through some of the designs about what the issue was, how it was before, and then how the new experience is better. And they loved it, and I think that's a really great way to make yourself stand out because not a lot of applicants actually go into the effort of doing that. And so I had a few more interviews, like a panel interview, and all the time after that, I always created a slide deck because they were online to kind of show them at the end of the interview what I've done before and why I'd be great for the company. Um, and so at the end, I got the offer in late November. So it was, I guess, a little bit earlier, especially for design. But this is an engineering role, so people are hiring a little bit earlier. So let me chat about like um, let me chat about my internship experience. It was awesome, and this picture was the first day. It was the orientation, so I have this like computer like hooked up to it, and we have like Zoom of 200 people going on. Uh, and the first thing I want to talk about is the culture and the intern events. This is like one of my favorite parts of ServiceNow is the culture and the events that they've put out. And the early in career team at ServiceNow is awesome. They've created all these different events like coffee chats. They sent us like a little mug, coffee, ground coffee from Starbucks and stuff like that. They sent us a succulent package where we all got into Zoom and kind of like built the succulent together. We had a movie night. We had like three different Zoom rooms with different movies to watch. And then finally, they also still kept the part of like giving back and fundraising. So they sent us a reusable T-shirt, recycled T-shirt, and we built a tote bag out of it, and then sent it off to a food bank in San Diego so they can use it. So all these events are awesome, and the culture at ServiceNow is great, and I love it. In terms of like work, I actually so first, I think like one of the newest experience that I had was working in Agile. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what Agile is, but I've never like worked in an Agile environment, and so I didn't really understand what it was. So I spent like the first 2, 3 weeks actually learning how all the workflows work together, because all I know is like Agile is not waterfall, and that's it. But there's so many like technical aspects of it, like story, pointing system, and stuff like that that I had to learn from scratch. That is super, super cool. And so when I'm working in that, basically what I do is the engineers can kind of develop the web components in small features, and they would hand it off to QEs like me to kind of test them, break it, and stuff like that. So, for example, if they're creating like a card, something that I would test is putting in very long text in it to see if it's truncating correctly, or putting it in on mobile, putting it on a large viewport to make sure that those also work well together. Second, I created some unit tests. So that is a little bit more technical. It was a little bit more programming involved. Um, but basically, these unit tests will be, um, the engineers would have to run them every time they push it up to GitHub. So every time they add code to it, they would have to run these tests to make sure that the feature still works as expected. And then finally, the internal tools. I developed some using the ServiceNow platform to kind of like simplify the workflow for engineers a little bit. And because I have a design background, I kind of like went into like my personal Figma to kind of like draw out like what a prototype for that internal tool would be like. And I passed it on to the actual team because that project wasn't done when I was leaving. So I passed that design on to my team um, to kind of like for a frame of reference. So it was nice that even though I was in a more technical role, I was still able to do a lot of design work in there. Um, this is kind of like the biggest takeaway that I got from my internship is to be your authentic self. And that could mean so many different things. Um, Especially because it was virtual, it was hard to meet people and um, like express yourself and let people know who you are. So being your authentic self and kind of like showcasing who you are is very, very important. So there's a few things that I did that I really loved, enjoyed doing at ServiceNow. First, it was talking to strangers in the company. So maybe starting week 3 or week 2, I started to talk with different people. And every time I finished talking to someone, I would ask them for a recommendation who I would talk with next. And then I kept that in an Excel sheet. So I've talked to Tom, and he recommended me to talk with Jimmy, and then it just goes on and on. At a point, it got a little bit too overwhelming because some people would recommend like 2 to 3 people, and I would have to reach out to them. But it was awesome because I got to hear from different perspectives. So I got to talk with engineers, product managers, recruiters, designers, and so many more. And everyone there is so awesome that they're willing to recommend me to talk with someone else. And that's also a great networking technique as well because you're in the company, so it's like easy to talk with people. The second thing is taking setbacks. So there were a lot of things that I made at ServiceNow that people thought people had feedback on. And I don't know if it's because of IU, but in my part-time job, I actually never really got these like feedback before. But at ServiceNow, I did because it was like real life work and things were moving very quickly. And so whenever I got these like feedback, I was like kind of upset at first, and I was like, oh, like I didn't do as well. Like I was disappointed at myself. Um, but then slowly I realized that these feedback aren't personal. They aren't like targeting towards you, and all these feedback they're giving you is trying to make you improve and make the products better as well. So I kind of took a step back and detached myself from the products that I was creating, to look at it at in a more objective lens. And I was able to take these feedback more objectively and without being too emotionally attached to the product. And also, whenever I got these, I'm just like, oh, these are just going to be what it is in the real life. So I better learn to prepare now than when I start full time. And then finally, don't be shy and have lots of fun. We were using Slack during our internship, and we had like an intern channel, and so I would always just like go in there and like type funny messages to everyone, and everyone has a good laugh. We also created like a meme channel for everyone, and so like all the interns would just like put like memes onto there. It was kind of funny. ServiceNow is hiring interns, which is awesome. Right now they have like business and the software engineering internships. If you're into more technical stuff, I'd recommend going into the software engineer internship. Or there's like a design internship that opens later on as well. You can apply on Jumpstart or the ServiceNow website. Thank you so much. I know this might be kind of short, but if you have any questions about like how to like stand out in your interview, if you have any questions about like portfolio, resume, those kind of things, like feel free to reach out to me in any of these like channels. I'm happy to like talk, and a lot of people have helped me during my application process that I kind of want to help other people as well, because all of my mentors before they really helped me understand what I wanted to do and how I should do them. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paco. That was amazing. I think I resonated with a lot of points that you shared with my internship, especially the one where you mentioned about talking to strangers. It takes courage, but yes, that is one of the most important things to do. So moving on to the next section, we have a lot of questions for you guys. The first one is for Aditi. What were the interview questions like for LinkedIn, and do they have internships in the winter period from January to May?
Okay. So before I answer that, let me just like, I didn't talk through the steps for the LinkedIn interview process. So there are 4 rounds for LinkedIn's interview process. It is very, very intense. But I think the goal of their interview process is to really convert in the end. Unfortunately, COVID sort of affected that this year, but so first round is a recruiter screening. It's just like your general recruiter screening where they're just trying to understand if like you have the skills and like you are someone that they want to send to the hiring manager. Second round is 2 back-to-back interviews with designers. So these are portfolio interviews where you spend like 45 minutes going through your portfolio, and they'll just ask you questions based on your portfolio. Like they'll ask you to defend some of the decisions that you made. It sort of depends on who you get. Like I know some others have got like more interview specific questions, like how do you work with others and stuff like that. But mine were very specific to my portfolio. Third round is a design challenge. You get 1 week to do that. And then if you make it to the 4th round, that's when you have to present your design challenge as well as 2 other projects. And then you will be asked questions about the decisions that you made there. Again, that's why I said you have to know your project inside and out in order to defend why you've made decisions. And then I had 4 back-to-back one-on-ones with different designers. So it was a very design-oriented interview process. Those were super casual, to be honest. Like it felt like we were just like casually talking, like, you know, they asked me about my classes, like what are my favorite classes. One of them did like an on the spot sort of like brainstorm with me. It sort of depends on, I guess, their mood at the time. Like I don't really think they have an interview script. It's just sort of a way to get to know you better.
Thank you, Aditi. That was an elaborate answer, I guess. I guess that helps you, Michelle. And the next question we have is, could you both talk about how you created your personal websites? How important is it to have a personal website for the internship search process? Would you want to take that, Paco?
Yeah. So I created my first portfolio website in sophomore year because I wanted to kind of showcase my work and help recruiting as well. When I did that, I actually made it on my own, like with HTML and CSS, and it was a lot of work. The result of that is that I didn't spend as much time as I wanted to on the content of my projects. So this summer, I spent a lot of time reworking my portfolio using Webflow, which is an awesome software, a service that can make your website look great and feel great, but with no code at all. And that was all like that spared a lot of my time to kind of create better content for the projects that I've made. So I guess like a few things about portfolios is that you need to curate what projects you show. So I'm looking for UX internships. So the projects that I showcase is all UX based. Um, Before that, I had like UX design, I had like graphic design and branding design, and it didn't flow really well. The second thing is that the content of each project. So describing what the issue was before, describing how the design got there, and then finally how it impacted or what the results were. So if it was an actual project, then maybe tell people how many people used the product or something like that. If it was like a class project, maybe talk about um, how other students liked it or what the feedback was in terms of that. Just make sure that it's really easy to read because recruiters definitely look at those sites, but they don't have a lot of time, obviously. So make it so that the pictures and the text are balanced. I don't know if that answered the question. I'm sorry.
I think that is great. Yeah. How important is a personal website for the internship search process?
Very important. So I asked like recruiters, I asked them, do you actually like look at portfolio sites? And all of them said yes. When I was talking to like recruiters, they with resumes, they often look at different things. So some people look at experience, some people look at skills, but for portfolio sites, all of the recruiters said they look at the sites. So I think it's definitely super important.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Paco. Next up, we have how can one learn about being a UX designer? Can UX design be implemented with a Kelly majors? Can you get involved in UX design without majoring in it? Would you like to take that, Aditi?
I don't know if I'm the best person to take that because I feel like my degree sort of made the transition easier for me. So I don't know if Paco, if you have any more experience with that.
Yeah, I don't think you need a degree in that. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. Yeah, I think like you can get into UX design without a UX degree or anything like that. Obviously, if you're doing like HCI major, that will get like very more technical about like the design process and stuff like that. So if you really, really want to dive deep into that, I highly recommend those like graduate programs. But if you want to get started in it, I don't think you would need to be in a UX major or anything like that. When I first learned how to like do like UX design, I read a lot of like articles. So I follow like a few blogs on Twitter that posts about like UX best practices, and that was really helpful because it was an easy guide to learn how to make better user experiences. In terms of integrating UX design into Kelly, Kelly doesn't really have a focus on UX design, but since I came from Cali, I think one of the best things that they offer is kind of like how you present yourself and how you communicate your ideas to people. I think that's very important. So even though I'm not pursuing like a marketing degree or marketing career in the future, Kelly definitely helped me to present ideas clearly, which is very important in internships and in the full-time job as well.
Yeah, that is very true, I feel. To get started, you can just one of the important things what I did, and that resonates with Aditi and Paco as well, is I consumed a lot of content on the internet. Especially, I exploited all the content, the medium subscription, and the subscriptions offered by the university. So, people often consider mentoring as a one-to-one interaction with somebody, or you get to know about this UX design with, like having a conversation who is already in design. But there's a lot of resource that is already available online, so you can consider a blog as your mentorship and like walk through somebody else's journey through that blog post. So yeah, that is also somewhere, a place where you can learn about a lot about UX design.
Or even
I
attend
just
events like these.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing to that. Honestly, I feel like you can link any major to UX because UX is so interdisciplinary that there's so many different things that you learn in other majors that are applicable. So like Paco mentioned, in marketing, you probably learn how to present, you learn how to sell your ideas. That's so important in UX. In architecture, I learned how to present as well as like back up my ideas with a rationale. That's so important in UX. So there's so many different aspects that you can link from so many different majors. I think the most important thing that you have to learn is how you sell your background. The moment you learn how to sell how your previous background is like applicable, that's when I think you're really going to stand out.
Very true. I would totally agree with that. The next question that we have is, what's your biggest tip on a good resume?
I I'd say maybe readability. If you have the bullet points down, which if you've read like the career guides and stuff like that, you kind of know how to craft a good like bullet point. But I think like one of the biggest thing that people overlook is how readable your resume is. So a lot of people just like put a lot of different things in there that doesn't really relate to the job itself. So kind of curating what experiences you put there, how you lay out the resume, to kind of like tailor it so that recruiters can easily glance at it and understand what you're looking for. I think that's really important because a lot of times when we craft resumes, we're like, okay, on from our perspective, like this is great, like it has a lot of information there, but from a recruiter's perspective, it's hard for them to actually like see what you're into, see what your achievements are really easily, and that sometimes could turn recruiters off, I guess.
Do you have any comments to add, Aditi?
No, I think Paco answered.
Okay, okay. The next question that we have is, how did prior experience, your projects or classes, prepare you for your internship experience?
I think my classes helped me learn the process of design because, like I said, I didn't have any UX experience, so I had to learn everything in school. So it really just taught me like how to approach like design problems. Um, and then once I had like an idea of that process, that's when I started doing my own projects because wasn't particularly like passionate about the class projects. And I feel like when you work on a project that you're very passionate about, that's when you can sort of combine like that design process that you've learned, as well as your passion and interest for that subject. And I think together, like that's when you create a really great project.
Yeah, that is very true. The next question that we have is, what kind of questions did you prepare for your interview? Was there a fixed format,
Oh,
or
so
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Did
Go
Paco, did you? Sorry.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So for all of my interviews, when I did that, I created like a little document for myself that I printed out and I laid it in front of the computer to kind of like go through what I need to talk about. And kind of like the questions that I asked is why they chose to work at ServiceNow. I think that's really important to help me understand like why I want to join ServiceNow as well. Um, and kind of like the job specifics. So like for me, it was when I was interviewing for quality engineer. So I was interested also in the UX side. So I asked questions like how often does QEs work with UX designers, and that shows the interviewer that you know it's like a thoughtful question, not just like, oh, tell me about your day to day. And also kind of being like up to date with the company. So like if the company has like a certain like new news, like ServiceNow just released like a new release, you can like ask them about that. And also like the job location. So if they have multiple offices, ask about the differences in the offices, how they differ, what the culture is like between the offices. Those are some things that I asked.
I just want to add to that. I used Glassdoor for all my interviews. So if you go onto Glassdoor, and if you see their interview section, people have posted the interview questions for the different roles. So I definitely highly recommend looking through that. And I think for LinkedIn, because they were like a larger company, and I really, really wanted them, I started reaching out to previous interns and started like asking them what was their experience and the questions that they were asked. So that gave me like a firsthand experience of what the interview process was like and like what I could expect.
Thank you both for your answers. And the next question, considering the job market and the pandemic situation that we're facing right now, how did you navigate through building a strong rapport with your team and the managers?
Yeah. First, obviously, like what I did, I talked with different people in the company. That was very, very useful. It was awesome because everything was virtual, so I was able to talk with people from different offices. But in terms of like the one-on-ones that I had with my mentor and my manager, I asked very insight like questions that weren't like work related. So it was like questions that how I wanted to improve myself. So, like how can I perform better in the workplace, or how do you take feedback and not take it personally, stuff like that. And I think the managers like definitely appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
With LinkedIn, we had weekly happy hours with my team. So that was really fun. It was just like a really easy and fun way to like build relationships with my team. My team also had like a party planning committee, which I was a part of, which was so fun. We had to like plan games for the group and also like different activities, like, you know, tell us about your childhood or your hometown. So it was just like really fun ways to like learn about each other. And then with regards to my manager and mentor, I had weekly one-on-ones with my manager just to keep her up to date and like get to know her. And with my mentor, I had daily one-on-ones. So my mentor and I like knew each other very, very well by the end of it.
Yeah. That sounds so fun. And also I definitely feel like it could be a little bit intimidating sometimes talking to like managers and stuff, but it's definitely really important to build like a good relationship with them as well. So our next question, how would one go about learning about the technical aspects, like the coding side of UX design, without being in like a school program for UX?
Yeah, I didn't really take a lot of coding classes.
Mhm.
I only took maybe like two at IU, and it was like the informatics classes, so they weren't really in depth. But there are some really good websites for that. So like Code Academy is kind of like the main like go-to for coding. Also like LeetCode, I'll put the link there, but LeetCode is a great way to kind of like practice interview questions. So you don't really need to do like hard questions, but like even the easier ones, like it gives you a, a better like understanding about how like coding works and like how solving issues with programming is done, especially in an interview setting.
Thank you for those recommendations. Okay, for the next question, are there any organizations or classes that you specifically took that you think are very helpful that allowed more exposure in the field of UX?
For me, I think the most helpful class I've ever taken is design strategy. Basically, any class by Travis is amazing. It just teaches you like how to approach whatever you're doing from a business perspective, which I think a lot of designers tend to overlook. They tend to like approach design like very ideally, but you have to be able to understand like how what you're designing is going to make money, because that's what the company cares about at the end of the day. So design strategy was amazing at sort of teaching us like how to differentiate between your ideal design versus your MVP, which is like the cheapest and most basic way you can get your design out.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
was gonna say product management by Travis Brown. I haven't taken design strategy yet, but product management also very similar. You work with a lot of like actual clients to kind of solve their issues, and you could obviously um, design stuff if you want to. It's part of the program. But Info I300, which is human computer interaction design, that also is a great like introduction to UX research methods, and actually like wireframing and stuff like that. It's a pretty good class as well.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I'll definitely take that into consideration for my future schedule. And our last question, how did you decide your major that was your calling? And tell us a little bit more about like your decision and whether or not like you want to stay on that track. Thank you.
I can start first. I don't think I really knew that my major was my calling until my internship, honestly. I was really scared that when I started the program that, you know, I was going to finish grad school and find out that I didn't like UX either, because that's exactly what happened with architecture. And UX was like something that I was good at and I liked doing it, but I never really knew if it was like something that I could do for the rest of my life. But it wasn't until my internship that I really realized that it was, when I started working for and designing for first line workers. Because that was like the first time where I felt like I knew exactly why I was designing. Like I was designing to make an impact for someone and help their life. And realizing that purpose was what helped to realize like why I was in design. So that was a really, really nice realization for me.
Yeah, I'd say like it's very similar for me. Like I didn't like realize that I wanted to be in UX design until I started my part-time job here. But I also like adding the second major of informatics was kind of like a slower process for me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna like just jump into another major. I actually first like took a semester like minoring in informatics just to understand what it's like, and I fell in love with the program because it's awesome. The classes are great. The culture is amazing. So I told my advisor like I wanted to do that, and they it just like worked really well between the two schools actually. Yeah.
Thank you. That would be, there's one more question. Um, Someone asked, how is the information architecture elective? If you guys have taken the class.
I think Paramita is right now, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm taking that class, and even Fatima took it last semester. It's offered in both fall and spring, and you can take it as an introductory class. It's really good for like getting just into design, and it is more about like navigation and information, like the structure of the website rather than the actual graphics or the visual design. So it acts as a very nice base to build on top of UX design. So I would recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not coming from a background that where you've dealt with a lot of web development, then definitely you should take it. Even if you come from that development, looking at it from the perspective of design and auditing the website and what exactly is going wrong, and where exactly are the touch points, and how exactly do you want to evaluate the website. So if you want to know and you're curious about all that, then it's a good elective to take. Yeah. And the instructor is great. She's super helpful, she's very welcoming, and she always welcomes you with any questions and any doubts that you have at any time. Okay, I think we are almost time. Thank you so much, Aditi and Paco. That was great to have you. And it was a very valuable session. Over to you, Paramita.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, thank you so much, Aditya and Paco. This was a great presentation, and we all learned a lot. And thank you, everyone, for joining and asking so many nice questions. We would love your feedback. Tell us how you felt about this event and what events you would like to see in future. There's an evaluation link here on the screen as well as in the chat, and you can also scan the QR code that's on here if you want to pull up the feedback form and give us some feedback. And with that, I guess I'll conclude it with a huge thank you, and hopefully we'll see you in our next events. If you want to stay updated, we also have a Facebook group on and a group that you can join for early updates and more content related to web design. You can also post your questions there, and we'll try our best to answer. So yeah, thank you so much, Aditya and Paco, for taking your time. And we'll see you around.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you, Paco.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, I'll end the meeting now.